Hello, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are back with the SAP IP Business Talks. Today, my guest is in Oslo, and close to Oslo, in the wonderful south of Oslo, and it's Magnus Hakvag. Magnus is, first of all, it's a business partner for a certain time, and he has a very interesting business model and background. So it's not the typical IP guy who we have typically here in that format. He comes to a certain extent from a completely different background and making something very interesting about learning. And we want to talk today about the question how people learn, how we can make learning more attractive. We have the concept of lifetime long learning. So this is really a change. And we have a challenge. We have a changing environment, and we call it in economics dynamic capabilities, which means we have to adapt anyhow to what's going on out there. And learning is a key mechanism for that. So we want to talk about that today. And I want to encourage you to give us questions, comments in the LinkedIn chat. We are happy. I'm absolutely happy to pick it up and to discuss about your questions and your comments together with Magnus. So now, Magnus, thank you very much for joining, and please tell us what is your background? What are you doing? What is your company doing? We are very curious about your serious game learning approach. Please tell us more about that.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm actually in Asker. It's the suburb of Oslo. It's where my wife came from, so that's obviously where we live. So my background is actually in physics. I have a master's degree in physics. And we learned that, well, you're like the potato, could do whatever, and that's exactly what I did. I moved into innovation entrepreneurship back in '98. Started a student organization with a few others in Norway, worked with entrepreneurship, came in contact with IP, introduced IP training at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. I've been doing training there for quite some time. I've been part of since that time, every white paper from the government on IP to let's create more awareness of this topic, which nobody at that point knew of. Well, that's the really specific people. And then I started moving on into the realm of entrepreneurship innovation. I got part of the Center of Entrepreneurship, which is the foremost entrepreneurial education in Norway, and they are actually quite famous globally. But that's where I've started out and kind of drifting off from being in the realm of physics and then moving into being in the realm of, I would say, competitiveness, looking at how can I enter the market, how can I protect my position. Obviously, IP is part of that, standards is part of that, innovation is part of that, and entrepreneurship, building businesses. So that's kind of my starting point. And then I kind of started drifting away from that, from my starting point and more into the training part of IP. That's what I've been doing most of my life, is consulting, capability building, and training. So I've been part of most education in Norway until 2010, all over Norway, actually. And then I figured out, let's do more consulting, let's build more companies. And back in 2008, I joined something really cool. Europe wanted to make a best practice guideline for how to structure a company's innovation capabilities on an innovation standard or a management system standard. I joined as an head of the Norwegian delegation for that, which is now the predecessor for the ISO work, which I'm part of the management of. And then bringing me into the training aspect, which is quite relevant, is that been focusing a lot on terminology. People think that it's the most boring topic on the planet Earth. It's actually one of the more powerful topics on planet Earth because they'll control the language, controls all dialogues.
Absolutely.
And also without this understanding of that, you get nothing. So I've been leading this terminology project in ISO. I had 65 countries joining in this. We had people from WIPO, WTO, World Bank, the OECD. I'm actually part of developing the Oslo Manual. and created a terminology standard for innovation. And part of that was also innovation IP terminology, which is a bit messy. But it's the same for innovation, is that if you ask 10 experts, you got over 100 answers, and it depends on the time of the day. You don't even get the same answers from the same people. So that's kind of my background. I'm into this training element, building blocks of fundamentals. And then back in 2014, we started moving into more advanced training. We actually look at that, okay, to really train people, we need to start out where people are at, and we need to make it more applied. And then we may figure out, okay, let's make simulations. We started out making advanced training for Airbus Defence and Space to train innovation champions. And then they just didn't want to only learn IP. It needs to be in context of what they do. And that's kind of the missing element. Yes, I could teach people what is a patent. Well, if you're not an IP expert, that's completely irrelevant. They need to know, how do they apply this in their real life, what they do normally in their day-to-day business, when they need it, how to address it, and when to ask for more expertise. And I can come into this afterwards. So we are more focusing now to, well, the business in building capabilities, and capabilities building or looking on the business system of firms, meaning how do you structure a firm? Because that is also part of the structural competence of a firm. And that's one approach. The other part is teaching the people. And then there's multiple layers of addressing those. And then we have bite-sized e-learning, and we got serious gains, both physical and digital, which is actually quite powerful tools to do a lot. And we have, at the moment, we have 5 hardcore research projects financed by the Norwegian Research Council. We have 40 plus partners. They are actually not only in IP, they're actually in sustainability, they're in governance. So they're a bit broader than just IP. We're actually making a serious game in defense standards with and for NATO. And we're making a game with and for WIPO, which I'm not talking a bit more today because it's going to be launched for what it's about. But we are kind of involved everywhere.
Okay. So let's stay a little bit with terminology, because I like that very much. I mean, we learned that from the book 1984, right? From George Orwell, who had this controlled speech, and that you don't call the things how typically people would call it. I mean, right now we have a war in the Ukraine, and the Russian says it is not a war. And so what is a war and what is a special operation? And I mean, and we had the same thing with Trump. So what is a lie and what are alternative facts? So and back to Hitler, and maybe also before, people used so with the mass communication, with communication channels, people are aware about language and what that makes. So because we can only think in terms, we have to think in language. At the end, we have to have words for the things about we think, for the concepts. And so it is absolutely mission critical to help people. I mean, when I give lectures about valuation, so typically we start with the discussion about what is a price, what is a value, and what are costs, and maybe we should distinguish that, or the other way around. So I make often fun out of my wife works in a publishing house, and I tell to my students, so when I want to finish the dinner, so finish the dinner for me, I want to go, okay? So then I start a discussion about entropy, okay? Because you are a physicist and I'm a physicist, and when you are in a dinner party and you start to talk about entropy, the table is silent. Nobody's talking about that because nobody understands anything about that. And it is clear that you cannot talk about that when you don't understand it. But when you talk about prices, costs, values, patents, brands, trademarks, whatever, you will have a discussion, but with people who are not really sure on the foundations, on the basics of that concept. And so I can't admire this point more than be careful with your terminology. I mean, maybe this is your physics background, which makes you so sensitive about that. But so my students, I'm absolutely sure my students like that. Okay, so Mr. Perkson, a sociologist, he started to talk about plastic words. Okay, so words terms which comes from other knowledge areas, and you put them together, and there's energy management support. Yeah, and what do you mean? Yeah, and so I think it is a powerful tool in your hands when you can help people with meaningful words, with the understanding of terms. So, is that your experience too?
Oh yeah, totally. I know when I explain why is this relevant. Well, I learned from my dad once that he was in charge of the troll pipeline to one of the largest platforms in the world, and I asked, "Why do you write the minutes?" And he just stopped, looked at me. Well, those who write the minutes controls the output of the meeting, and then I learned later those who control the language controls the dialogue, which controls it all. And then starting back when we started, I kind of really understood the power of terminology when we worked with innovation management system and how do you structure the organization to be more, let's say, efficient with how you work with innovation. And I say innovation like this because that's not the appropriate way of using the word or the term. Now, then one of the last meetings, we had this insanely large quarrel, and people like thinking were talking about the same thing, but we're not. I just went around the table like this. You mean, you mean, you mean. We all align. Can we please start with terminology now? Meaning, when we have, and that's where we kind of miss out on the training as well, because I'm sending a message on the basis of my background, my context, and the others are observing that same message on the basis of their context. There's a miscommunication. So that's why you need to control the terminology. And if you want to, let's say, build an IP culture or an innovation culture in the firm, the first thing you need to start out with is what does innovation and or IP mean for the firm? And if you don't do that exercise, you're going to fail epically.
Yeah, absolutely.
They even have in the Bible, I'm not really religious, they have the Tower of Babel.
Yeah, I mean, it is exact. I can't agree more. It is exactly the point. What does that firm means with innovation? Yeah, is that new to a person, new to a department? Is it new for the firm? Is it new for the branch? Is it new in that country? Is it globally new? So simply, what means new?
Yeah.
And when is an innovation? Now, is it a success that we sell it one time to one person? Who are the early adopters? Who would we call so? So is it when it gives that away for free? Yeah. So is a customer when you give it to your family and say, please use it, and so on. So it is really around innovation, so many misunderstandings, and especially because it is so often used. Yeah, it's a buzzword, it's a plastic word.
Yeah.
And two plastic with innovation management. So then, yeah, is an innovation manager a guy who makes the innovation? I don't believe that. It's a facilitator typically, and and so on. So I mean, this terminology is a really important issue, as you said. Yeah, who controls the minutes and who who give to others the handouts is in the leading position. Yeah, another thing what you mentioned, but I think it's also very important when it comes to learning, so conveying messages and changing mindsets and these kind of things. You distinguished, let's say, capabilities from let's say just delivering knowledge. So can you go a little bit deeper on that? What do you mean with capabilities and knowledge?
Yeah, so in order and that's kind of the question we sent out in advance, is that you need to know what people need to know. So I could give you something to read. Now I have theoretical insights or information, but in order to make use of that, I need to train on it. I need to make use of it to make me capable of conveying and doing something with it, or else it's just information. So when we're talking about levels of knowledge awareness, I could say I am aware of patterns as a word, but it doesn't mean that I'm capable of writing a patent application. Those are two distinct different levels. So I could distinguish, I could use the Bloom's taxonomy to kind of distinguish different levels of knowledge and what I'm capable of. And can move into the more advanced level. No, I'm capable independently to make use of the information given and apply it to do something specific, which is quite essential. But moving down to awareness, I could have several levels of awareness. I could be aware of the words, what patents, trademarks, and so on. But I can also have a different kind of awareness, meaning I'm aware of a situation where I need help, which is kind of what we might be aiming at in a company level, is that I need people to know when they need help to observe, kind of getting the matrix glasses on.
Yeah. I mean, that's so obviously you're really involved in that kind of discussion because I mean that is so important. So I'm working a lot of. I mean that's my job to educate, train people. And so often from outsiders, they just come and say, "Yeah, there's this content. Just deliver that the people know it." I mean, yeah, I know that, but that means nothing to me. Yeah. I mean, and the difference between information and knowledge. Yeah. So I just deliver information, so it makes nothing in my brain. So, but even when it is knowledge, it doesn't mean that I can apply it anyhow,
No.
or that I recognize a situation in which I should apply that knowledge. Yeah, very interesting. And that means, to a certain extent, that has to be defined. So when I work with heads of IP in IP departments, and then we have a long discussion about the question who in the organization should know what about IP. And I mean, IP is not patents, yeah. So it's a broad term and with many different understandings. And that means that is quite an effort to define that, but it is so important. I mean, at the end, the mistakes are not done in the IP department. Yeah, so typically not. When mistakes happens in terms of the shit hits the fan, then it is done outside of the IP department. But the IP department has to take care for it. And so an infringements, HR, so know-how, steal, whatever. I mean, we see that at the end on LinkedIn or at the court cases when Donald O'Connell comes with the next know-how theft case, and all these guys or the litigation guys come with infringement issues. Then something went wrong, and typically it is because somebody who should have known something and apply that knowledge was simply not able to do it. I mean, that's the consequence.
Yeah. And I normally, when I talk about to make people understand what we talk about, they also don't always need to know about IP. They just need to know when to zip it. Meaning, when you're on the airport express train, to make that an example, I say, let's make the example. I take myself, when I turn on the camera, I walk through the train. How many is fired? They get the message. Then I'm not actually talking about IP at all. I'm talking about what you should not talk about. And then people start thinking, no, that might be a good enough level for some people, but others need to have a higher level of understanding what it is. And now we're talking about the organizational capability to keep information on the inside. That's a capability they need, not leaking insights. Well, how do I apply this? Well, I could also address this and not only training the people, I could train the business system of the organization. Is within the quality management system, which most people would kind of recognize, is the controlling elements of the organization, how it's structured. Whenever there's a procedure, something you need to do, if you're a large or small company, there might be some sort of insights embedded inside of the system. Moving into these procedures, you might want to read this first. So that's the structural competence. But I'm still not capable of applying it, but I need training to do.
Yeah, I mean, a wonderful example is HR. Yeah, so when a person leaves the company, yeah, and then they talk about what is with the parking pass and I don't know, do we have all the keys and I don't know, all these ridiculous things. But the HR guys have no clue what these person really worked on, which kind of intangibles, knowledge, know-how, secrets this person knows. And they don't talk about know-how stealing and theft and not willing transformation of know-how. They don't talk about it. They don't talk that this is a crime and that will have consequences, but that should be the last words from the company to this person, to say, be careful when you go to our direct competitor. Yeah, and no, it is not discussed. So, I mean, and to a certain extent, maybe even this person don't know what are really the trade secrets and what is okay, yeah, to share with others, and where lies the borderline to the trade secret and what should not be shared, even after your job. I mean, that is a question of not just awareness, also of very practical skills. How do you design your interviews, your regular basis discussion with companies, with your employees? I mean, that leads us to another question in terms of how do you design your training program sessions to make sure that you are not just delivering know-how or knowledge, let's say knowledge. You are also you entitle people, you make them able to do something in terms of you create capabilities.
Yes.
What are you doing there?
So my first question is, what is the learning objective of the persons I'm going to talk to? What do I need them to be able to do when we leave? What are the capabilities we need them to have? And just going back to this mine and your stuff on HR, that is also interesting because that's the defining part, because HR is not really human relations. That is personnel management, which is something else, that's managing people. And learning about mine and yours, that's the first thing they learn in kindergartens. But just at some point on the way, we forget that this is mine, this is yours. We just need to create this awareness dialogue about this is mine, this is yours, and that might be theirs. And that part is missing. But what we start out with when we do training is that whom is the audience? What are their context? What are they doing? What are the capabilities I need them to have? And then I need to really, and this is essential, I need to recognize that those people have a lot more insights that I think on IP. They just have a different term for it because of experience, they have relation to this in context. So I need to figure out how could I tap into the vast amount of examples, and the examples talks a lot. So if I'm doing a lecture, well, I need to know whom I'm talking to and have relevant examples, which is relevant in their context, not using Apple when I'm talking to a plastic manufacturer because it's completely irrelevant. It's too large. It needs to be relevant to the people I'm talking to.
Marcus, I like that so much what you're saying, because typically to some of my legal law colleagues, yeah, so I call them stand-up comedians, okay, these professors. Why? Because they have a certain teaching style, so they don't care who is sitting in that room, what is their background, what are their interests, why they need that lecture. So they are just, I mean, I don't know, I make competitive law, yeah, competition law. I go into the room, and then 90 minutes you get competition law. Okay, here's the start, here's the end, and that's it. And now competition law is delivered, and they simply are not interested. So what are the capabilities, the competencies? It's just you have to know something about competition law, and now I made my 90 minutes lecture, and now I'm gone. Yeah. And that is to, especially on the legal part of IP, this is what I see a lot. Yeah, when you work with, and it's not that they are bad teachers or they do that intentionally. It's simply this is the style how things are taught. And especially when we talk about what is distance learning and what are the advantages of that, and what is learning in the classroom, and how it may be blended learning. I mean, what you say is you have to understand who has to know what, and then we have to define the way how we create that capabilities at that people, and that is a job. This is not just I give you a book and read it.
No, and then that's a different kind of capabilities, because teaching IP, no, I need two type of capabilities. I need to know of IP, and I need to know how to convey IP, which is something else. And when I'm just, regardless of my audience, just talk, well, that's broadcasting. I'm not teaching it. I'm just sending a message out into space.
Yeah.
And what you consume, that is something, well, that could be whatever. No, but if I'm getting this entanglement with the people in the audience, starting asking questions, getting them engaged, well, they start reflecting. That's essential. And I could bring the level what I'm talking on, which is essential, to the level of the audience. Because normally when people are starting to teach people, they want them to know what I want them to know, which is completely off. I need to start at the level of the learner and bring them to where I want them to be at. That's something else. So I need to start at a really low level, getting to know them, and then, well, take their hand and lead them somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, that is more or less the complete opposite of I know my content, and now I deliver the content. Yeah. So because this is completely independent from the learner. I
Yeah.
don't take anyhow care about the learner. So this is the content. I can't change the content, and so I deliver that. Yeah. I mean, as you said, this is broadcasting. This is not training or teaching or education, and the other part has no chance to learn something. Yeah, you can receive a message, but that's
Yeah.
it.
And then you could be on overload, because that's what we're focusing on. It needs to be consumable, meaning it needs to be at the correct level. It's like having food. If I make it too strong, I won't be able to eat it, and it can't be too much or too small. It needs to be something I can consume and relate to. So, and also it needs to be relevant. It's like if I'm having had Corona and, well, my taste is partially gone, I can still taste my coffee. Thank for that. But feeding me like the 3-star restaurant food, that would be pearl for swine, because that's no point in, because I won't be able to appreciate it. The same goes for the audience. You need to give them what they need, but also in a size of information which are capable of consuming, or just get a hand of. May I be excused? My brain is full.
And I would like to add consuming, yeah, and especially when we talk about capabilities, maybe also digesting, yeah. So
Yes.
you really have to make it to your own
Oh, yeah.
knowledge and capability, and not something which somebody told me I should do it in that way. Yeah, this is what I really hate, when people say, "Yeah, somebody told me I have to do that." I mean, are you a robot? Is there a software which runs and you are just programmed, or is it something which you really understand why it is necessary? Yeah. So this is also an important difference.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
what Tobias said, that is quite important, because you mentioned these structure. So learning about structures from structures, and this is especially when it comes to onboarding of new employees, so important that these people understand what the structures are and how they should behave in that. Do you make also onboarding training for people?
Well, we have bite-sized e-learning, which could be used for onboarding, or, well, as support as part of the business system, or you could use games for that, because you want to make them understand and learn from the firm, because that's essential. You learn faster from people at your own level. If you just take kids, if you go into kindergarten, or let's say you have a 4-year-old like me, and you wanted to teach them to use the iPad, that will take me 5 hours. Or you give it to a 1-year older sibling, that takes about 5 seconds. They learn faster from people at their own level. Meaning, how can we get people from learning from people at their same level? Well, we can make simulations. And that's what we have been doing. That's what we did with Airbus when we started with Serious Games, is that we make a facilitated, I would say, simulation, where we engage people so they can, where we engage them in dialogue, which is in context. And when you support your argument, well, what you do is that you support them with your own experience. And now what just happened is that you transfer tacit knowledge on others. And now you and you learn something which is quite essential. You know who knows what on whom to contact when you need something, which is part of your knowledge. It's not just what I know. It's also you need to understand that this is kind of the system for learning. That I need to know who knows what. That is just as important, because that's part of my accumulated knowledge.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's come to a little more practical question. So when we say, so how do you choose, for example, the right teacher, the right teaching format for a certain teaching level? Let's say from basic awareness, rising for non-IP people, to a very specific IP management tasks and IP professional. So how is that done?
Well, first I would start out with doing a distinction first. Is the person in the mode of being trained? If it's a student or a younger person, they're in the mode of being trained. So you could kind of use whatever methodology they will be able to consume something. And then anybody else is not in the mode of being taught. And then the other part is that we need to distinguish when we're teaching children versus adult, is that with kids, we could use more instructive-based training. This is pedagogics. Training adults, we can't use that. We need to use something called andragogics, meaning they need to be in control of the learning themselves. They need to feel that they master what happens. They don't want to feel bad that they're not capable. We need them to feel like they're blooming. They need to see the relevance on their own terms when they have time for it, which is quite essential. And also, they don't like to be told that this is essential. They need to experience like an epiphany that, well, this was really interesting. That's how adults learn, and we need to kind of apply those. And having that in mind, I need to look at the different groups. What are their needs? If it's somebody really don't care, it's just somebody which is, let's say, more in the administrative part of the firm. They just need to know that they shouldn't let anybody into the firm because we could lose insights. Well, that's enough. But moving up to, let's say, researcher, they need to understand the difference of mine and yours and others' insights. And also part of the core elements of the corporate law is that the right to be named.
What, by the way, it's totally funny. It's that many, let's say, experts have never heard the term negative know-how. Okay. And I like that example so much, why training is important. Yeah. So that when you know what doesn't work, yeah, let us assume you invested a year time in a certain product, in a development, in a recipe, whatever, and you worked out many times, this doesn't work for this reason, for that. Maybe you even don't know the reason, but you know it doesn't work, and you give that to somebody. I mean, that is such a value, and simply because so the others can bypass all their problems and are a year ahead of you, and all their tremendous costs are avoided just by saying, no, I wouldn't do that. That doesn't work. I know it. Yeah. I mean, and experts are typically not aware, so they don't say what worked, but it is enough that they say what doesn't work. And this is a wonderful example for this understand why training is so important. What is an intangible asset? What is intellectual property? And what kind of information has a value for third parties and should not simply be conveyed just because it is a trade secret. I mean, sorry for disturbing you, but I mean that is one of these examples which are so important in such a training, that people get an eye opener. So why training is important.
Yeah, and also want to kind of distinguish the groups. If you're on an executive level, then there's other, I would say, elements to observe, because the moment you address them wrongly, you could change the power balance within the board. Well, you don't want to do that, because then all hell is loose. So you need to understand that with that kind of people, you need to be an authority yourself. You need to establish as kind of authority so they believe in you, and you need to be faster and more relevant to something they can apply straight away. If you're moving down to the IP experts, well, they know potentially, if they are IP expert, the technical aspects. You want to teach them, and then they have mixed groups with people from other trades, so they can understand where can I apply my knowledge, what are the integrated circuits with others, so I can say where we're overlapping. Because the moment you start overlapping, what I believe is correct might not really be the optimal solution. You need to understand and actually respect that you are trained better in teams which is really diversified. And that's something we are observed when we do game-based training, is that we engage people in this kind of dialogues, and the more diversified the teams are, the more the people learn.
I can't agree more. That's the next thing, that you think then on your own, oh, I would have never asked that, or I would have never been brave enough to ask that, but very good that this guy asked that. I mean, and when you are just in your crowd, so nobody will ask that question. Everybody has it on the lips, but nobody will say that something. So just something about the audience. So dear audience, I'm very happy that you prize us for what we are talking here about. But I mean, this is a live format, and it is much more fun when you give us comments and questions here into the live studio, so we can pick up these aspects, and we are delighted to talk about that. Okay, but when you just want to listen, it's of course okay, and we have the after show party on LinkedIn, and there you can ask questions or giving us comments and your perspectives and your experience. So Magnus, when it comes to building of capabilities in companies, we have this effect of the stickiness of knowledge. This is also a very interesting effect. And can you explain us how you deal in your serious games with this effect?
Yeah, so first, I just want to define what it is. So what is stickiness? Stickiness is really kind of measures how much sticks in your head. So if I'm doing a measurement before I do a training, and if it's no reflection involved, and you do a test after training, let's say right after training, you're capable at once to answer everything. Go 2 weeks, well, close to nothing. And in 2 months, the only thing remember is the bad coffee and the anxiety. You should have learned something, and you have no clue. So it measures how much you remember and are capable to do after a certain time span. And when you train your organization, because this is expensive, not only having the external trainer, but the real expense or the cost is the internal alternative cost for the people being trained. So if you take like 60 people from a department and train them, and you use 2 days of training going off somewhere, that is 100 working days plus travel. I said, that's a half year of expenses for one person. It's insanely expensive. No, you want that to stick to the people. Well, you need to make sure that it's applied. And that's what we do in the games, is that we make it relevant. We put together teams where people get to know others, because that's part of it. It's kind of the network effect. And also what is essential doing proper training, we need to establish something called a psychological security. Because if people are not secure in their position or feel they master their position, you won't learn anything. If they're not having fun or actually being enjoyed, they're just turning off the earth. So it needs to be some sort of relevance, and they need to see why. And that's what we're doing in a game, is that it's really a simulation. It's like a military exercise, but it's way cheaper. You need to teach people to apply their tools. Well, we could do that in a simulation where you meet others and you're being challenged by others. And when you're being challenged by others, they are challenging you with context-relevant examples. And we are transferring this fingerspitzengefühl, this tacit knowledge, which is all this negative knowledge of what doesn't work. And then you also have this feeling embedded in you. And that's what we do with games. It's kind of a cognitive programming. We have a sequence of happenings where we first make you understand something. For example, in the strategy type of games, we make you learn how to extract relevant information to sort it out. And then we make you train you on how to make informed decisions. Well, that's a capability, making informed decisions. But I need to know what information I need to extract. And the next part is that, okay, I need to make a IP-related decision, but they are not detached from the system. They are business strategic decisions. So you need to take in when you work with patents, trademark, and all the other elements of the firm, and also the reputation. And no one need to stress test them and really make them experience that, well, this strategy really sucks because we forgot this, this, and this. And when you're going at it one way, I could come at you from a different angle and completely take you by surprise. And numbers doesn't always matter if I'm in a better position than you. So the focus would be moving from protecting my inventions and saying, okay, how can I, actually get to the market, and how can I protect my position in the market? And I'm moving to competitiveness. And now it's a bit broader than just IP, but it's IP in the context of the firm.
I agree 100%. I mean, we have two very interesting questions. Very good. Thank you for the audience. Thank you to the audience. That's wonderful. So, Shupei asked the question, how do you think law can be better taught to non-lawyers? So before Magnus answers, I would like to give you an answer. Don't do that. Yeah. So, I mean, you are the expert, you are the lawyer. And why should a non-lawyer be taught in law? So that doesn't make any sense. And by the way, to a certain extent, that is what I see again and again from IP experts, typically patent attorneys or trademark attorneys. They start to teach managers, decision makers, whoever, law. I mean, you are the expert, you know it, and it's okay. So what they have to know is something completely different. They have to know the consequences. They have to know options, solutions. So that is something completely different, and they don't care about the law in per se because they have you as an expert. So it is exactly what Magnus said. We have to stand into the shoes of the people. What do they have to learn and why? And I'm in deep doubt that that it is necessary to teach law to non-lawyers. That is, from my perspective, not a helpful approach. But Magnus, what do you say to that question?
I would say totally agree, because I don't need to know about, let's say, the tax law or the IP law or the corporate law. But what I would like, let's say, a non-lawyer to know of is that they know there is a law. And the purpose of the law is to protect you and do something. But how that is done, that's where the lawyer enters. So I need to teach them where the interaction points are, so I can have this dialogue with the lawyer to solve my needs, which is not legal needs. I need to know when am I playing the game, like the laws being the rules of the game. I don't need to know all the rules. I need to know, well, I sometimes need, but then that's at the point of entry where it's relevant.
Exactly. And Shupei says now, what when the non-lawyer is an IP manager? Shupei, the same. It's exactly the same. It's a manager, and it's not the law expert. So it's about the consequences, the options, maybe a little bit about the background. But this is not learning. So
No.
it is the manager makes the management job, and you makes the lawyer job, and otherwise something in the interface is not well balanced.
But I could also add into that is that it also depends on what you mean with IP. Is the IP the asset or the laws protecting the asset? Those are two distinct different things.
Absolutely.
So if it's the law, the tools protecting, then that might be relevant. But if they are the IP manager or more like the project manager, well, managing assets, well, then that's a completely different trade, and you just need to know when to bring in the lawyers.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, so I mean, it's a wonderful question. It's very sensitive, and we really have to distinguish the nitty gritty details here. And I know that the first reaction is, okay, I convey you the message, I bring you I make you that you know it, but to a certain extent, that's the wrong reaction, so to speak, to solve the overall problem. Another thing, what Joe Doyle come in, and hello, Joe, Joe, it's good to have you here. And he says, how can you engage people who are non-experts and they don't want to be engaged. And I mean, Magnus already answered that, and I agree again 100%. It is make it relevant to them. So try to give them examples and consequences of not knowing that. And that makes the relevance. You have to create relevance and should not think that this is given. That other people understand the relevance of this kind of knowledge. Magnus, famous last words, because we are in the last minute.
No, if it's to kind of teach those who don't want to be taught, let's say it's a manager. Well, I just need to focus on what's relevant for them. They don't want to be taught IP, but they want to be able to control risk. That's okay. Let's talk about your risk exposure, and then I can enter at a different level. I need you to be able to manage your assets.
So thank you.
Make it relevant. Yes.
Thank you very much to our guest today, Magnus Hakvag from House of Knowledge. That was a fascinating discussion about learning, about creating capabilities. Thank you to the audience. We are both available now in the after show party on LinkedIn. We look for your questions, comments, and I'm happy to talk with you about that. I mean, it's for us both a topic which is very close to our heart, to bring knowledge to the people, to make people capable to do something. And Magnus has a fascinating approach with House of Knowledge, with that serious games. So when you have never heard about that, please get in contact with him, learn about that. I think this is a wonderful example how we can improve the overall knowledge and this lifetime learning challenge. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. See you next time on our SAPI IP Business Talks. Thank you, Magnus, for staying with us, and have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.
Bye. Life is good. See you.